Time for another speaker's tip. I'm going to continue talking about how to connect with your audience, keep your audience connected. In the last tip, I talked about care about your audience, grant them importance, and know your material. Now, this is one simple concept I'm going to share with you today, but it has many applications. Don't confuse your audience. If you create a confusion in the mind of your audience, you lose the audience. And the way you create confusion is you don't give them accurate information. Talk about when I was a child, and the image they get is that you're 6 years old. I was driving my father's car on my first date, and all of a sudden I got to switch to 16 because you've got your driver's license at 16 and you're on your first date and you're in high school. And then you go, I was a freshman in college when I've had my first date, and all of a sudden they got to change now to being a freshman in college. You didn't give them the accurate information so they could form the picture in their head. So you wind up creating confusions in the audience because you're not communicating accurately on what you want them to see. When it happened, where it happened, who was there are incredibly critical components. Just a couple of weeks ago, we finished the 2021 World Championship of Public Speaking, the international speech competition in Toastmasters International. And I was watching the finalists compete. A lot of the finalists would start off with a story about in their younger years. And again, you didn't know if, I'm going to say, if they were 6 years old or whatever. And then they starts talking about when he was younger. And I'm paraphrasing this at this point, but he had a conversation with someone. He went home, and I'm in my mind, I'm thinking he's 16 years old. He goes home, he talks to his daughter, but he doesn't tell me how old his daughter is. He's talking to his daughter, and I'm thinking his daughter's like 4 or 5 years old. And then as he's discussing things, I figure out that his daughter is like 13 or 14 years old. She's in high school. But the speaker never tells me how old the daughter is. So these are critical things so that you don't confuse the audience and they get a clear picture so they can track right with you. And it's a discipline you need to put in. If you start out, you said when I was 22 years old, I was living in Brooklyn, New York, working as a telephone repairman. Yeah, okay, I got it. I was going to work one day and I stopped by a coffee shop. When I went in, now I know where you are, I know how old you are. But a lot of people will start their speech off. I was going to work one day and I went in a coffee shop. The whole setup is not there for me to understand what you're talking about. So the date, the location, I said, who's involved, what you're doing, where you are in your life, where it is in relationship to now is very, very, very critical when you're speaking. And I would recommend going through your speech and seeing, is there any information you're trying to plop into the mind of the audience that you're not giving them the full information for. Now, what I see happens with this, we have a picture in our mind that we look at. We see all 5,000 data points in this picture. We know exactly when it is. We know where it is. We know, it was a cold day. We know it was at night, whatever. We see everything in that picture. And we're trying to tell the audience about them. And we pick out like 3 points, and we tell the audience 3 points out of the 5,000 that are in that picture. Now, I'm not saying you have to tell them 5,000, but you have to give them enough so they can see the same picture that you do. And I think I shared this on an earlier tip, but there was a point in my life where I couldn't figure out what I was doing that other speakers weren't. And I was trying to communicate it. And then I realized I was no longer looking at the picture in my mind. I was looking at the picture I was painting in the mind of the audience. I was looking at what the audience saw. So I knew what I was saying. I knew what I was laying in there. And that's when I really started to hold my audiences, because I could put exactly on that blank canvas, that's their mind, I could put exactly the items I wanted in there. So I saw what they were looking at. And then I didn't have to rearrange them or add something later. Okay. So along with this is a time sequence. Your time sequence should go in time in your speech. So if something happened when you were 6, normally Doesn't have to. This is not a cast in concrete rule, but normally try to progress through the examples in a sequence from earliest to latest. If you do transition back, you can have an incident and you said, I was at work and such happened. And it reminded me of something my high school teacher said. And you go back to high school, but you have to transition back and then come back. You have to make sure you take the audience with you wherever you go on the time sequence. Okay. Otherwise, they're completely lost on where this road of life that you're trying to share with them, all these examples you are. Okay. So the subject the tip today is this: don't confuse your audiences. Give them enough information that they can see the picture that you're looking at, or they know what you're talking about. And to do that, go through your speeches or have somebody else read your speech and say, is there anything in here you just don't quite get? Is there any question in here? Another key thing that I do this all the time is, when was it? Where was it? When was it? Where was it? I'll go through the speech, and if I change the when and where, do I put some sort of a transition in there so the audience knew that I changed the when and the where? So they're moving through this with me. Okay. You're going to stay more connected with your audience if you do that. Give it a shot. I'm always open. Love to hear from you. Let me know what you think. See you next week.